All right. We want to get started today. How y'all doing today? I hope it's been a great week for you, better than mine. I had some crazy things that happened this week. Got in a car accident, but everybody is safe. But I want to talk to you. We've got another episode of This Week in Supervision, and I'm excited to talk to you about what we discussed. And we're going to be talking about anger management this time. And just being able to be in situations where we can support individuals who have had experiences of trauma and pain. And it's crazy. And this week was really we were kind of all over the place in supervision because we had so many experiences that were being shared with Oh man, it just got really deep. A number of people experiencing working with clients who have experienced complex trauma, very complex trauma, and we supported them with working out how to deal with that, how to support it. Hey, Evie, what's going on? And so it just gets deep in supervision, and it's a fun experience. Sometimes you don't even make it to what you had prepared to share, but it's funny because this week things kind of just tied in, and we started getting into some cases where people were cutting, and that was on the list. And so maybe we'll go over some of that really quickly. Let me see if I can pull up some of my information and share with you. A lot of times, what I'll try to do is I like to go through questions and have just a few questions to share with the group and see where they are. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking about different interventions, talking about dissociation. We deal a lot in our groups with trauma. We do. We do. It's psychotherapy based. It's a psychotherapy based group. And let me see if I can share my screen because this was the first question that we had. I don't know that this thing is gonna let me do it. But I'll just cite it. Who is the creator of EMDR? Who is the creator of EMDR? And this is a great question. A, Marsha Linehan. B, Francine Shapiro. C, John Bowlby. And D, Sigmund Freud. And so we went over that question uh, and scaled through the group. Let them put, and what I'll do is let them put the answer that they believe that it is. I'll let them put that in chat and we just work from there. And it's a good way to challenge the group and then also to be able to evaluate where their competency is relative to that particular subject. And so the answer for this one was none other than Francine Shapiro. And so what we did, and we kind of get them in the practice of like how you might want to have them prepared once it's time to test. And so, since we know the answer, we don't just leave it there, do we? What we do is we study also the ones that weren't the answer. So we went over a little bit about like, well, who's Marsha Lanahan and what did she do? We talked about DBT and how she, her involvement with that. Many times we'll talk about what is the premise of DBT, what is it based on, who does DBT, what evidence-based treatments are effective or DBT most known for. And we might talk about how it's borderline and suicide, and it's really good with that and other things too. John Bowlby, a lot of them, they know who that is now. We're talking about attachment, so they know that. And we just go through all of them. Sigmund Freud, of course, psychoanalysis. And I even threw Erickson in there because these are the guys I just try to make them really familiar with and how he was working with the psychosocial and the crisis, how we go through these different stages of development and crisis. And we talked a lot about that. Anyway, oh man, I should have wrote down my time. So this is probably not going to fit. Um, but I'm sorry. But we went through that. That was the first question. Then we went through another question that we were talking about a 16-year-old boy who was exhibiting behavioral concerns, cutting, and all these types of things. And we had the group to identify what behaviors mentioned in that scenario or what those behaviors mentioned in the scenario were indicative of. So what was he doing? He was cutting. He wouldn't expose his skin when it's time to go swim. He would have sudden changes of irritability and withdrawal, mood changes, frequently wearing long sleeves. And so the question was, A, is this bipolar disorder that, we're looking at? B, parasuicidal behaviors. C, suicidal behaviors. D, active phase schizophrenia. And we went through all of that. This was an instance of parasuicidal behaviors. And so then we asked the group, what's some other examples of that? And sometimes we repeat this. Sometimes we've gone over this. We repeat it. We make sure that the impressions are made and so that we remember these concepts. But in this week, we discussed these concepts with real life cases or case scenarios. And it seemed like it happened in each group. Anyway, all right. So, I almost forgot. Let me share here just before we get too far off that we do have a few things that we want you to be mindful of that's coming up. Real quick, we'll take about 30 seconds if this thing will let me do it. Um, to share that we do have a supervisor training coming up and want to share that with you in July, on July 29th and 30th. We will have a supervisor training. We've had a number of people signing up. Let me know if you all have any questions about this. This is a great way, again, to start collecting on your own and making impressions. Like, oh my goodness, I just had a supervisee. I'm going off on a tangent, but she was just telling me about how all her supervisees coming out. She was under me, got her own, and how they were all getting jobs at the VA. And it's just awesome. You get to do a lot. Okay. And then also we have this training, the DSM-5 TR training. We have the live training coming out in August. We'll get that information out. But if you want it on demand, check us out if you have any questions. Okay. So let's get on back to this. Okay. So there was a video that I always like to show video because I get bored of hearing myself. I think they might get bored of me sometimes, but they seem to like it. But just to make sure, we show different videos that are relative to some of the topics that we're talking about. And in this case, there's a number of ways to treat suicidal behaviors, because what happens is that we see that these individuals often are dysregulated, so they're overwhelmed with emotions. They don't know a lot of times how to properly find someone to talk it out with. Many times they're troubled. And so I had come across, I saw someone at one of the restaurants and they had cuts. And that's the first thing that went across my mind was it that looks like a cutter here. And so I asked the group in the scenario that we had, and just kind of just thinking of that, like, tell me a little bit about what's going on with someone who's cutting, and I gave a scenario and description. What is the state of mind of this person who starts to, what do we call it? Restrict. Okay, if we say restrict, that means we're starting not to eat. Okay, um, or we're cutting, we're starting to restrict. There maybe there's a trauma that's going on that's causing this, and so we got into a situation like that, and got them in the frame of mind. So if someone is restricting, some of the things that we learn that we want to rule out is you know and also cutting. I said, sometimes you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's a cutter who's not having some issues relative to not really liking and being in love with themselves, maybe even some borderline self-hate. Okay, so we talked about that. We talked about how if someone is restricting eating, how a lot of times this is a way to control situations, many times because they haven't been able to, because they've been controlled. Okay, so these are signs, these are clues that we get. We're cutting things like that. How do you know? Scenario came out. How do you know if someone who is cutting is behavioral seeking or attention seeking or something like that? And we talked about how to differentiate the thing. And one of the things that we discuss is looking at the history. How long has this been going on? Is it a new occurrence? Is there a trauma that the person has recently experienced? And so we need to dissect these types of things. So if it's a trauma they've recently experienced, they started cutting and then they start restricting, many times that's a sign that both of those situations indicate many times that we're trying to get control of the situation. And as a matter of fact, we had someone to say that one of their cutters said that they cut because they were trying to control, and they were like, this thing, nobody, they can't control this. I get to control this. Okay. So that's a little bit what we talked about. But many times people who, I want you to see if you notice any parasuicidal behavior being discussed with this particular case. I want you to pay attention because I haven't mentioned all of the parasuicidal situations, but to break it down, parasuicidal is basically a behavior that someone might have to where it can be self-harming, but they don't have intentions. It's called like it's a, I always forget it, in a non-suicidal what is it? Let me see if I can pull it up. I always forget. Um we'll have to skip past that. But basically these are non-suicidal behaviors, okay? There is not an intention for the person to kill themselves, but they do have the tendency to bring harm upon themselves, okay? And so we're going to skip past. Well, let me just bring up this video and see if you had someone who was experiencing rage, because this is many times our clients are switching from experience to anger and even rage. And what do we do to try to regulate this? Now, this is not what you want to do at home. This person is not a therapist, but these are actually some tools that I use to that have been drafted from therapy that you can use. And we'll talk about this a little bit. All right, let's see if we can share and get to it. Oh boy, this is a long video too. So we're gonna have to speed this up.
Idiot. Stupid.
Welcome back. Here
we have an issue of road rage
a lot.
here, and the person has had a lot of trouble being able to regulate their emotions. We're gonna kind of go into their background, what is causing that rage, and what do you do about it? All right. So the background is that they had a parent. The parents were very confrontational with one another, would yell and things like that.
And you don't have control over it, and now you're expressing anger. You know, the anger works. It's something that gets installed in you at a very young age, and we don't realize it when we're little that you have these triggers. And for you, the trigger is clearly yelling. The trigger is something from your past. And now you're stuck in this pattern where life is flipping the switch and you don't have control over it. And now you're expressing anger. You know, the anger is an issue, rage is an issue, but that's just an expression of something deeper that's getting triggered. And so I want to show you what I'm talking about. Why don't you both come with me? We're going to come over here. And this is what I call the word wheel. And the reason why I love this thing is because it helps us talk about things at a deeper level. So when your parents were either yelling and fighting and you're off in your room and you're hiding, when you come out from anger, what's a deeper emotion that you were feeling when your parents were fighting? Sadness. Okay, now when you're in your car and somebody cuts you off, you clearly feel anger. Mm-hmm. What else do you feel?
Disgust.
Okay, disgust. Now let's look toward here.
Frustrated.
Frustrated.
Aggravated.
Aggravated.
Hate.
Hate. Did you feel those things when you were angry with your parents? Frustrated, aggravated, hate? That's what was making you punch a hole in the wall?
Yeah, just a lot of aggravation.
So what I want to do, though, is I want you to get in touch with the impact. So when you're driving with him and he was doing what he was doing, what's the word that comes to mind?
Probably fear.
Okay, so let's come out as you're driving and he's raging and you're feeling fear. These are the words that sort of relate to that. Let's come out and let's see what word jumps out at you as the deeper emotion.
Insecure.
Insecure. Let's go a little bit deeper. When you're with him and he is doing this rage, what else do you feel at a deeper level?
Helpless.
How does that hit you to know that the people that you love feel helpless around you?
That's a tough word. It's an impactful word to know that you feel helpless.
Did you feel that way around your parents?
Most definitely. There was nothing I could do. You know.
And see, here's what's interesting. is that the reason why it's so important to hit these deeper emotions, because this is the trigger. You're not getting triggered because you're angry. You're getting triggered because you feel helpless, you feel frustrated, you feel aggravated. These are your triggers. When you feel that way, you express anger because that's what you saw when you were a kid. And you are now, as an adult, expressing what you saw at the same moment you feel these deeper emotions. The only way that you're going to break this pattern is to understand the impact that it has on the people that you love. They feel helpless, they feel scared. That's not what you want. And to start expressing yourself at this deeper level instead of expressing the anger. And I want you to get control of this before you literally get killed confronting somebody. I'm terrified about that, honestly. And that's what we're going to talk about. What steps you can take to get this under control when we come back. Today we're talking about out of control rage and the anchor that's underneath it. And Devin just revealed that his rage is triggered by the feelings that he had about his parents' divorce. What did you learn based on what we did with the word wheel?
I learned that I'm affecting other people, and
Tell her.
I learned that
I'm just gonna stop it right there. This is not therapeutic, but it does demonstrate an example of what we might do with helping someone to be able to speak out emotions that maybe was not able to do it. I like to look at these things because a lot of times we're focusing in on the individual who has had the trauma. And it was just interesting to me how quickly he was able to just point out, I experienced sadness. You know, I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that, especially, you know, just seeing how he emotes and things like that, that would be the first thing that he would say, you know, when referencing what was going on with his parents. Okay. It makes sense. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes even as a therapist could get caught up in the actions and the activity and that's why we have to ask questions and use certain tools like the emotional wheel is what you saw. You could get something like that online or order it to where you can use a tool like this emotional wheel to help point out emotions for individuals who don't really thoroughly know how to express them. Some of us skip from the words of expression to actions. Okay. And I skipped past the part where it said that he often would punch the wall. Okay. That would have been a demonstration of a parasuicidal behavior for someone who does that on a regular basis. And again, depending on whether you're punching the wall, banging your head up against the wall, things like that, with some other parasuicidal behaviors. And y'all can let me know. I can't hear you. But you know, punching the wall, burning, scratching, cutting, carving words or symbols into your skin, and we're not at the tattoo shop, pulling out your hair, picking with wounds. These are parasuicidal behaviors. And what I have seen is that many times there is a darkness that surrounds these types of behaviors. There's darkness as far as what I think about me, what I'm thinking about life right now. And so the parasuicidals, and this is what we have to constantly go over in supervision, is that when we're cutting, for instance, this is something not necessarily that's a suicidal action. We looked at the video and showed that here a few weeks. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm trying to take myself out. But many times it can mean that I'm trying to calm the situation. But here, using an emotional wheel is an opportunity to start the process of expressing feelings, expressing pain, finding out what they think about themselves, what they thought about those situations. What does it feel like to feel helpless? What is it? And then you start the wheel. You know, when you weren't acknowledged and your feelings weren't acknowledged, or let's just say when mom and dad were arguing and then mom starts going off and calling your dad all these names that he expressed that she would say, how did that make you feel? Let's talk about too how deep that sadness goes that you've been feeling, because a lot of times anger is expression of sadness. Okay, we're going to stop right here. I'm sure I went way over. I lost track, wasn't able to keep the time, but we will get back on next week, and we hope to see y'all again on next week. Y'all take care and have a blessed weekend. Bye-bye.